So, welcome everyone to the next in the series of fireside chats for the Open Publishing Festival. My guests today are Amy Brand, who is the director of MIT Press and co-founder of the Knowledge Futures Group, and Claudio Aspesi, an independent consultant who's authored 2 Spark reports on the deployment of data analytics in academic institutions. And together they've just published a piece in Science entitled "In Pursuit of Open Science, Open Access is Not Enough." So, Amy, do you want to tell us a bit about the paper and what it's trying to tell us?
Sure thing, and thanks so much for having us join you. This is really a great opportunity for us to talk about the work we've been doing together. So the community is rightfully celebrating more open access and more open data, but we know to build a secure foundation for open science, we also need to think about the substrate and think about open infrastructure. There's a lot happening in this space right now. But there's also growing recognition in the academic community that open access is not, the panacea that people were hoping for when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to affordable scholarly scientific and, scholarly publishing. And so the paper explores some of the unintended consequences of a wholesale shift to open access, including the shifting business models of some of the larger commercial players as they move more into the technology and platform space. And we suggest some of the ways to mitigate against the risks of too little competition in infrastructure and analytics.
So, Claudio, what was it that motivated you to become involved with writing this paper, and why now?
Cameron, first of all, thank you for having us, and thank you everyone for joining this webcast. There are lots of consequences from potential consequences from losing sight of what happens when you put so much information in the hands of a very small number of highly capable users of that information and data. And so the concern about some of the unintended consequences, both in terms of how the market for data will operate on the one hand, and the implications on the life of researchers and faculty on the other side, really is what prompted us to get involved. As to your question, why now? It's because terms and conditions are being established today. Contracts are being signed, tools are being deployed, and as we learned in other areas of activity like publishing, once you start to establish terms and conditions, it becomes very difficult to change them. And so it's important to establish now the principles of using this data properly.
And we're living in a time where there's an awful lot of data, and the management of it is a challenge for all institutions. So the question of, yes, getting it right this time round seems like an important one. And I guess to that point, Amy, you've led a varied career with lots of different perspectives into different parts of research life cycles and processes over the years. How have those experiences shaped the views that led you towards the paper?
So I run a university press, right? I have, and by the way, unlike a lot of presses, it's not a heavily subvented operation. I have salaries to pay, and so, I'm a business person, but I think about everything that I do in the context of broader questions. You can't be a good publisher, I think, unless you're thinking about, how do we measure excellence in the production of new knowledge? And how do we think about the connections among authorship, diverse measures of attention, academic careers, credit, considering that so much work is multi-authored these days. And right now, all the really interesting work around peer review and what's working and what's not, and how do we make it better. So I always think about everything that I'm doing and publishing in this context of the ecosystem. And when I think about infrastructure, I think about it in a very broadly defined way. It's metadata, it's standards, it's tools, it's licenses, it's all of these things. And in working in the Knowledge Futures group and meeting Claudio and talking to him about the importance of making a case of rallying the academic community to play a bigger role in the substrate or the infrastructure for scholarly communication. I realized we had a great opportunity to bring our differing perspectives and skill sets together. But it's a topic that we both feel extremely strongly about, at this time. And what I appreciate, I wouldn't have written this paper without Claudio. And what I appreciate about his particular perspective is that he's coming with an understanding of the economic models and a business sensibility. This isn't about, a rallying cry for open is on the side of the light and that's all that matters, right? We really want to think about the models in depth and how to create the foundations for a better future.
I guess, thinking as the director of a press and from a researcher's perspective, we think of presses and publishers as providing the points that we think are important for our careers. You've also been on the other side of that some years ago, working on processes for looking at researchers as they were coming through tenure processes at Harvard. Do those things sort of connect in the middle?
Definitely. I think about everything that I do in running the MIT Press, in those terms. And so the act of publishing is equally the act of, getting excellent content out into the world, but also, serving the creator of that content within their academic career. And what that means, varies across fields and varies across the type of work. That's part of the reason too, like the work that I did in digital science, I'm just fascinated by different signals of rigor and excellence. I see a lot of potential in the creation of new metrics and analytics, coming back again to the paper and how we want to, make sure that there's room for more creativity and competition when it comes to academic analytics.
And so, Claudio, I guess by contrast, your background's not in scholarly communications, not in the academic world. In fact, I think you've expressed some frustration with the open access movement in the past. You tell us a little bit about the process that brought you into this, some of your background as well.
Yeah. My background is in strategy consulting. I was at McKinsey for several years, and then more recently in the financial markets as a sell-side analyst. And when you refer to my frustrations, a lot of that derives from the fact that the academic community is particularly slow in moving, much more so than almost any other area of activity that I've encountered in my life. Historically, that has been a weakness when it comes to what we are discussing today, because in the corporate world, it's very easy. Somebody sees an opportunity to do something, she or he go out and do it. They just put somebody in charge, establish a budget, set objectives, go off. You cannot do that in the academic community. The academic community has to think through. It has to rally willing participants who are interested in doing things. However, I would also argue that today we're seeing some of the strengths of that model. And that strength comes from the diversity of approaches that the academic community generates through its diversity. One of the things we always forget about the corporate world is that we're used to see the winners. And we lose sight of the many experiments that failed along the way. In a similar fashion, the academic community generates vast amount of initiatives and ideas. Some of them work from the beginning, some of them only come to fruition over years or decades even. but they have power because by the time they blossom, there's a strong commitment from people. They're not just doing it because they're told to do so. They embrace initiatives because they believe in them. Open access is a perfect example of that. And so I've come to appreciate more over time the strength of the academic model and the academic culture.
And Claudia, you both mentioned diversity as sort of a key aspect, I guess, on one side on the kinds of outputs and measures, and on the other side the kind of experiences and views and processes. Is that in a sense what you fear is at stake here in terms of the potential for monopolization of data and systems in the academic world?
Yes. We often worry about monopolies because we think about monopolies in a traditional way. We think of monopolies as raising prices and lowering standards of service. But there are even worse consequences from monopolies. And the worst consequence is when it leads the users of the services to all follow the same path. So the last thing I would like to see is for everyone to pursue the same line of thinking when funding research in a discipline, because one algorithm is telling people what to do. Even if that algorithm didn't have errors and biases, and by the way, you can argue you cannot write an algorithm without biases, but even if it didn't have any of those errors and any of those biases, the very fact that it's one is a problem. We need diversity. We don't know where research will go. We don't know where solutions will be found to problems. We need a diversity of approaches. That is counter to the quasi-monopolistic structure of many data markets and data analytic markets.
I guess, at the moment, it seems like one of the real challenges we have is the contrast between the need for coherent and clear responses from governments and medical systems versus the need to bring a diverse set of perspectives into that process and to make sense of the different views and different perspectives and to try and filter those. Is that something that's important for us to handle on the academic side? Is it a societal question? Or is it, and I guess what I'm getting at in one sense is, again, is that something that as an academic community, we really want to make sure that we're maintaining control of to preserve that set of different perspectives, particularly in a moment of crisis?
My observation, particularly at this point, is that the academic community has handled this extremely well. COVID-19 is a moonshot from the bottom up in many ways. There have been a number of reports that have been in papers that have not been properly vetted, but have also been quickly exposed. There's been a lot of commentary available, a lot of replication or attempts at replication of trials and experiments and protocols. And it's a perfect example of why diversity matters. You want to have as many approaches as possible because you do not know where you'll find a solution to a vaccine or a solution to a cure or the proper protocol. And it's only experimentation and effectively peer review, even if it's an informal process of peer review, that works. And that kind of diversity is what we want to preserve.
I guess, Amy, is in your perspective as a publisher, then this is a moment of challenge. I don't doubt on many fronts, but also an opportunity to do things differently.
Definitely. I mean, there's the kind of local, time context of COVID for sure, and we're doing a lot of experimentation at the press. All of a sudden things that weren't possible, like producing a book in 6 weeks, are possible. in the same way that telemedicine might not have been possible until COVID, and now it seems to be. Or we are about to launch a new journal format that's publishing peer reviews based on curated preprint papers. But as you know, in the book project, your book project on open knowledge institutions that we've been working on, we are doing a lot of experimentation, and part of what makes that possible is the relationship with the Knowledge Futures Group. What I have been trying to do at MIT and in partnership with Knowledge Futures is sort of be that example of a university-based, homegrown kind of lab, skunk works for experimenting with new models and new technologies, to kind of show that it's possible and very impactful for universities to invest directly, in these alternative infrastructures and different models. Yes, and I think that COVID is definitely accelerating some of the change that we want to see. It's it's scary as hell for publishers. We don't know. It's really interesting. So what I'm hearing from a lot of journal publishers is that in the last several months there was an uptick in submissions because people are home writing papers. But there's real concern about what the flow is going to be, in the months ahead with labs closed down. Huge hit to the book market. But again, it's an opportunity for us to build on the innovative instincts that we've already been working with.
And does that balance between, I guess, the traditional role of the publisher as gatekeeper in some senses, or at least management of the gatekeeping process.
Yeah.
Is that really in tension with the apparent need for speed? I mean, we're hearing all sorts of interesting stories about the challenges around preprints. But yeah, with the kind of community work you've been doing around PubPub and the more rapid publication of books as well.
Yeah, I mean, so the preprint model is the de facto, publish, review, curate model, and we want to embrace that at the press. We believe in the power of the brand. We believe in the power of the expertise to review and curate. We're very excited about the possibility to, help promote peer reviews to sort of a first-class scholarly object, and what that looks like in the context of peer review more generally. And then around the edges of that, even in the book space, allowing for more iterative publishing and more community interaction where that makes sense for a particular project, a particular author. PubPub enables us to do that.
So I guess the sort of diversity of processes and complexity of processes leads us back to the data around those processes, the analytics that might be helpful in terms of managing them or evaluating them, but might also be dangerous in terms of guiding us down the wrong path. I guess, so in terms of going back to the paper again, Amy, was there a moment when the need for this particular paper crystallized for you?
So it definitely emerged out of the work with Knowledge Futures more than anything else, and the opportunity that Claudio and I had to meet in Cambridge a couple of times last year, when we realized that our vision around in Knowledge Futures being a sort of guiding light in university investment in alternative infrastructures and models, and Claudio's work with Spark, the roadmap work, were very, very synergistic. We want to make the case to institutional leaders that this is the moment to step up to higher levels of investment and cross-institutional collaboration and collective action. I think I've heard arguments on two sides with respect to COVID. I've heard some people say, well, with this crisis, institutions are just going to be too distracted and have other priorities and they won't see the urgency around this. And then on the other hand, in terms of the impact on library budgets, in terms of what's already happening with big deals being canceled and new, contractual relationships between institutions and publishers, and the progress in open access, that this actually is the moment to strike. So it'll be interesting to see. You know, we are betting on the latter. You know, and really want this paper to help be part of the broader rallying cry to institutional leadership.
And Claudio, so you've talked about diversity and different perspectives, and again, you're bringing a different perspective into this space, writing for an academic audience, at least in part, I guess. What's been the experience of writing these reports and writing this paper like from your perspective? Is it a natural transition from the things you've done in the past, or is it something quite different?
I'm missing my investors' conclusions. Everything I used to write had to finally be mediated by the impact on the stock market and the share price of the companies I was covering. I'm free from that constraint today. I don't have to actually gaze into the future in a crystal ball and come up with a share price 12 months out for any stock. That's, in some ways, that's liberating, of course, because making predictions is particularly hard when it comes to making predictions about the future, as Yogi Berra used to say. But there is a discipline in actually thinking through what happens to a share price or to the financial performance of a company as a result of trends they're observing, of acquisitions they're making, of changes to their contractual structures, etc. And so even if I'm not any longer writing conclusions for investors, I always have in the back of my mind the question of how will management look at these opportunities and these threats, how will they likely respond in order to support their share price, and what are the implications?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the empiricism of testing your reports against stock market versus the empiricism of testing a claim in a laboratory. I think there's some interesting parallels there. I guess as we come to the end, for both of you, really, what are you hoping for the response for this paper, and what are the next steps that you'll be taking? Claudio, you want to start?
Well, we received a lot of comments. We are working through them. I would characterize it in two broad buckets. Some people offered very concrete action plans, and they said, look, we think we should do this and that and this other thing. And then there's a second bucket of people saying, look, we don't necessarily know what you should do next, but we want to help. You know, please consider us available to support where you're going next, because we think this is important. I think both of those are very useful. I think you will see more activity in the months and in the years to come in trying to bring together lots of different perspectives, not just the academic community, but learned societies, funding bodies, university presses, and nonprofit publishers into thinking about how to pursue the public good in a variety of ways.
And Amy, what are you hoping for next?
Well, we definitely want to capitalize on all the interest. I mean, I will say that the experience of publishing with Nature and the care that they put into this paper and the attention. I mean, we've been following our metrics and our downloads, and it's pretty neat to feel like you're having that kind of impact. We at the Knowledge Futures Group, we want to have fairly quickly a convening or two on everything that's going on in the analytics space, the alternative analytics space. Claudio and I have been talking for a while about, a very clear next step is getting to a sort of Budapest-like declaration of commitment from institutions to expend resources of various kinds. in this space. So that's part of what we're hoping for.
Great. Well, we look forward to hearing about the next steps. So thank you both, Claudio and Amy, for joining me. Interesting conversation. Good luck with those next steps. Thank you to all the viewers for your time. Stay tuned for another fireside chat today, where John Chidaki will talk to Jimi Hendrix from Crossref. That's at 1700 here in the UK, noon Eastern, and 1800 Central European summertime. If you want to hear more on infrastructure and community control, then tune in tomorrow for Open Infrastructure Principles for Third-Party Involvement. That's at 1900 UK, 2000 Central Europe, 2 p.m. Eastern. And look out for John's next fireside chat with Silvio Peroni and David Shotton of Open Citations tomorrow as well. And then on Friday, John and I will both be talking with Adam Hyde and Dan Rudman, who've been the people putting together the Open Publishing Fest with others. So if you're interested in that, join us at 1900 Central European, 1800 here in the UK, 1300 Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, and apologies to Adam, 5 a.m. in the morning in New Zealand. So thanks again, Claudio and Amy, for joining me, and hope you all have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.